Join me as I dive into African leaders' endless participation at multiple international economic summits. We highlight why those summits have had limited positive impact on Africa's economic development and what African nations need to do differently going forward in serious pursuit of Africa's own economic interests. Every year, African leaders are invited to high-profile summits hosted by developed nations like the United States, China, France, Russia, India, and so on. These summits, often presented as platforms for cooperation, are increasingly being scrutinized for their underlying objectives. While these nations may discuss shared goals and offer development aid, the hard truth is that the host nations are primarily driven by their own economic and geopolitical interests. The host nations' motives during these summits are often centered around securing their own economic benefits, expanding their geopolitical influence, and gaining access to Africa's abundant natural resources. This makes perfect economic sense from their own perspectives. After all, Africa is home to 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 12% of global oil production, and 8% of natural gas supplies. Given this wealth of natural resources, foreign powers see African countries as resource partners for their own energy security and industrial growth. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe to receive more insights of this nature about Africa's economic development. Now, let's examine some of these economic summits. Number 1, France-Africa Summit. With its colonial past in Africa, France still maintains significant influence in the Francophone African countries under the post-colonial arrangement called France-Afrique. The France-Africa Summits aim to strengthen these ties and to ensure French companies continue to benefit from Africa's natural resources. Many critics argue that France's influence in Africa is part of a neo-colonial strategy that perpetuates dependency rather than fostering true economic independence. Number 2, China-Africa Summit. China's interest in Africa is no secret. Since the launch of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in 2000, trade between China and Africa has ballooned. By 2023, trade between China and Africa was valued at over $282 billion. While China invests in infrastructure development, such as roads, railways, and ports, these projects are often financed through loans that African nations struggle to repay, leading to concerns about debt trap. Furthermore, Chinese firms gain preferential access to African markets and resources, often at the expense of local industries and jobs. Number 3, US-Africa Summit. The US also recognizes Africa's potential, but its focus is largely driven by concerns over China's growing influence. The US-Africa Summit is aimed at countering China's dominance, pushing American companies to invest in Africa, particularly in energy, technology, and healthcare. While this would seem beneficial to Africa, the primary goal remains serving the interests of American companies and maintaining geopolitical leverage over China in the region. Number 4, Russia-Africa Summit. Russia's interest in Africa is evident in its efforts to secure energy and military deals. The first Russia-Africa Summit in 2019 led to agreements worth $12.5 billion, mostly in mining, energy, and military supplies. Moscow's ambition is to expand its sphere of influence while securing access to Africa's resource-rich regions, all under the guise of building strategic partnerships. Number 5, India-Africa Summits. India's trade with Africa reached $98 billion in 2023, and its investments span various sectors, including energy, telecommunications, and agriculture. India's focus on Africa is part of its own economic development strategy to secure resources, including oil and natural gas, to support its growing population and economy. While engaging with global powers can yield benefits, African leaders should approach these summits with a clear understanding of their own economic and other interests. For African leaders, attending these summits without a clear unified strategy risks perpetuating the usual pattern of dependency. It is high time African leaders seize these opportunities to prioritize Africa's own economic interests and advocate for balanced partnerships. Africa cannot afford to be seen merely as a source of raw materials. and a dumping ground for foreign products. To make these summits mutually beneficial, African nations need to focus on leveraging the partnerships to promote agricultural development, infrastructural development, technology acquisition, and industrialization in Africa. Finally, African leaders should consider hosting their own summits, Africa's Global Partnership Summits in Africa, inviting global economic powers to engage with them on African soil. This shift would signal that Africa is no longer a passive player in international diplomacy, but a continent that demands respect and equal partnership. An annual Africa Global Partnership Summit could set the stage for African nations to collectively negotiate better terms for trade, investment, and development assistance. The African Union's Agenda 2063 is a great starting point. This blueprint for Africa's development outlines key goals such as infrastructure development, agricultural productivity, industrialization, and value addition. By prioritizing these objectives, African leaders can ensure that their participation in international summits serves Africa's interests, not just those of the host nation. Let's not forget, Africa is a continent with vast resources, talent, and potential. By asserting Africa's economic interests and hosting their own summits, African leaders can shift the dynamic and create a more equitable partnership with the global community. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and share it. And if you're new to this channel, please remember to subscribe to receive more insights of this nature and watch other videos. I look forward to reading your take in the comment section below.